What is up, everybody? The city of Cincinnati is buzzing right now. Not only are there Super Bowl aspirations for the Cincinnati Bengals, but those Reds are surprising some folks, and you love to see that. Kind of some parallels a little bit as compared to the Bengals and how they've built their team as of recently in the early stages, maybe for the Reds. We'll see. John, I know you are excited about those Red Legs. And, of course, the Cincinnati Bengals. I'm Anthony Cosenza, joined by John Sharon. John, what's going on, my man? You are rocking the Cincy hat so appropriately tonight.
We got the Bengals. We got the Red Legs. We got FC Cincinnati taking the MLS by storm. They have not lost at home at all this season. I went to one game, and it was electric, and they're continuing their quest of professional dominance. But, yeah, we're rocking the Cincy hat. Shout out to Ted Karras and his wonderful foundation. All the proceeds go to the organization back in Indianapolis to, I believe, benefit adults with disabilities. So tremendous cause. Phenomenal hat. But, yeah, we're repping the whole city right now. I used to be a big Reds fan, Anthony, until they stopped giving me reasons to be a fan. And then I learned who Ellie De La Cruz was about a couple days ago. And he seems to be, I don't know, the next Hank Aaron. So that's pretty cool.
It is pretty cool. I gotta show you something. You got to give me a second.
Okay.
Not that I love dead air, but I got to show you something. I'm gonna zoom in on you. I'm gonna put something on because I know a lot of people know that I'm from Southern California, and yes, I like the Halos. Yeah, I like the Padres a little bit as well. But I got to show you something. Hang on one second. I'm gonna show you.
I have no idea what this is.
You don't know what it is. I know.
This is the beauty of just kind of winging it live.
Winging it live. That is right. I'm going to see if this will show up here, if you can see it. All right. This is something I won in a raffle, when I was like a teenager from a sports card shop. I was always, I know Pete Rose is a polarizing guy, but I always loved how he played the game. So I've had this. I'm redoing my man cave and stuff, as you probably know, but I've had that. So I have supported the Reds. I liked Eric Davis. Barry Larkin was a favorite. Obviously, Griffey was always fun to watch. So from afar, my friend, I still have a little bit of a Reds affinity. Not as much as you, not as much as some of the other native Cincinnatians, but I do have a little bit of a connection to the Reds, especially in those late 80s, early 90s when both teams, the Bengals and the Reds, were really good.
My God, Charlie Hustle signed merch. That's probably like, how many jerseys do you think Pete Rose has signed in his career?
My gosh.
Over 100,000,
Probably. He's well into 6 or 7 digits at this point. Yeah. Anyway, it's a cool little jersey. I've had it for a long time and had it mounted and all kinds of stuff. So, had that thing for, good Lord, 20, 25 years probably at this point. But hey, it's cool to see the Reds. My point is, it's cool to see the Reds where they're at right now. It feels a little bit like Bengals 2020, Bengals 2021 potentially. We'll see. Maybe they're still a year or two away, but the city's a buzz. And it's not just because of the Reds. It's not just because of FC Cincinnati, but of course the Bengals leading the charge and having Super Bowl aspirations, as we said at the beginning of the show. And a reason for that, part of the reason for the buzz is mandatory mini camps coming around the corner, John. We've been going through a lot of the OTA headlines and questions and that sort of thing. We'll talk a little bit more about what we want, what some players we're looking at, maybe some storylines going into mandatory mini camps, because that's when things kind of start revving up a little bit. So we'll talk about that. But look, just kind of the big thing right now, as of now, I know we're sitting here crossing our fingers and our toes and all kinds of stuff, but so far, a normal offseason for the Cincinnati Bengals and for Joe Burrow, and hopefully that is something that will continue and add to these Super Bowl aspirations, because that has simply not been the case the past couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that's going to disrupt that is something that we just can't predict, and there's no use in worrying about it because it's something that is completely out of everyone's control, right? Like what happened last year was not in the plans at all, and they just kind of had the scramble with that. But yeah, like the offseason plan, I think, has been the same as it was last year. So they got a late start to the offseason just because they played deep into the postseason, so they kind of delayed things. And it's been the same kind of mindset. Like, if your training schedule allows you to be here, then you're more than welcome to be here. But if not, we'll see you in the middle of June when we really ramp up, schematic training and getting everyone acclimated, getting everyone on the same page for when late July comes. I believe Zach Taylor, he leaked that training camp begins, or players officially report July 25th. So that may or may not be the date that will circle on our calendars. But as soon as the date comes, you'll have 89 or maybe 90 at that point Bengals players present for training camp, including Jonah Williams, including, guys like Chidobe Awuzie, guys who are still injured, working their way back. But so far, nothing out of the ordinary. It's been a good offseason, right according to plan, with what Zach Taylor and his coaching staff had in mind.
Well, most of it is according to plan, and
sure,
the Bengals have had at the tackle positions good problems and some other problems that are not so much on the good side in terms of maybe disgruntled players and other movements along the line or alignments on the line that they are going to have to work with. And so I guess one of the places to start for me in terms of mandatory minicamp, the Bengals had most of their players participate in OTAs. I think there's a small handful. Tyler Boyd was in and out for a little bit, and some others. But one of the guys that was notably absent was Jonah Williams. And Jonah Williams, now there's a viral video that went out showing him lifting pretty hard and pretty heavy weight with the, recovering, coming back from both knees having dislocations throughout last year. So that is a guy for me. Will he show? Won't he show? What's his role going to be right now at mandatory minicamp coming up here next week? So to me, that's kind of headline news, or at least where I'm starting as to what's that going to look like there.
Yeah, so I think the observation because I guess this past Tuesday was the first official OTA session before minicamp, and it's when all the media members were there. So right now, the helmets are on, but there's no actual reps in the trenches, if you will. It's
right.
still all against air, 7-on-7, 11-on-11 against air. And right now, right tackle solely belongs to Jackson Carman, because La'el Collins, I don't believe he was present for this past OTA, but he has been, working on the side. He has been present with the team at times this offseason, but he can't participate. Jonah Williams isn't officially cleared to participate just yet either. So it's Jackson Carman at right tackle, and that's interesting to me, Anthony, because you had this whole thing about Cody Ford wanting to be a right tackle with the Bengals. Like, the Bengals allowed him to return to the position that he was at Oklahoma and what he was with the Buffalo Bills when he first started his NFL career. So there was this thought that he could potentially be in this competition if this was a true, wide open battle royale at right tackle. Maybe even Hakeem Adeniji gets a chance in there. But right now it just seems like they're just giving it to they're not giving it, but Jackson Carman is taking a hold of the position at the moment, while the two veteran contenders for the spot, Jonah Williams and La'el Collins, they're still working their way back. So I'm wondering if whenever Jonah comes back, and maybe if La'el comes back sometime in August, if that competition does open up to maybe 4 or 5 guys in total, or if this is just going to be maybe a 3-horse race. And right now, Jackson Carman, just because he's out there and he's participating, he's got a leg up on the others.
He does have a leg up on the others. It's his career is becoming fascinating to me. I mean, spot starter at left tackle with up and down results in the postseason last year. Started at guard spots, and now he's working out at right tackle. And this is kind of the make or break year for him, I think, in terms of where he's going to be. Is he going to be relegated to kind of just swing backup guy at a lot of different spots? I don't think he gets cut necessarily, but you also have to look across that offensive line and that roster and see all of the right tackles that they've compiled now, moving Jonah Williams over there, you bring in Orlando Brown Jr., obviously, and then you've got some of the other positions set. You like some things out of Trey Hill and some of the other young backups that you've put together there. So to me, this is a really, as fascinated as I am to see if and when Jonah Williams shows up, if he can participate, all of that. I'm also very, very interested in seeing how Jackson Carman responds to continuing to get the lion's share of snaps, presumably. And if this is finally the position where he looks comfortable, where it seems like he can actually latch on potentially into a starting spot or something of that nature. But for right now, I do think he brings value as a guy who can fill in a number of spots if needed as a backup along the offensive line. But that's not what the original design for him was when you drafted him in the second round, right? This was a guy you figured was going to be a starter on your offensive line. So very, very intrigued to see what happens with him starting in mandatory minicamp.
It's so funny that you mentioned that, because like when he was drafted, right, he was projected to be a starter. And then after a year, I guess going from like August of his rookie season to August of last year, he had lost not one but two starting jobs, or camp positional battles, if you will. So you're thinking, what value does this guy have now, especially because there was obviously stuff off the field that was revealed during the offseason and whatnot. So like he went from like very optimistic about his career to, is this guy going to get cut? And now he's kind of at this point in the middle where it's like the player that he was in the postseason. To me, that was like that's your ideal swing tackle. You don't want to rely on him probably for multiple weeks on end, but if he can come in and play in a pinch and give you some type of a spark there, I think that's fine. Like I think that's what he was, and I'm interested to see if he's anything more now. That I think that's the whole reason why he's been getting so many chances and opportunities, albeit in the very early stages of the offseason. They want to see what growth he's taken since the end of the season. They want to see if it's actually real, because it's been 2 off seasons, and I don't want to say they've been bamboozled, but they haven't been impressed with what he's brought to them right before the season, right? So this is a chance for him to really put up or shut up. And if not, if he is the swing tackle for the next 2 years, I think that's fine, considering, again, he was a legitimate candidate to get cut. But right now it just seems like it might just be for continuity's sake. They just want to get the same 5 guys out there when they're implementing scheme and getting guys familiar again. Maybe they don't want to start the competition again. Or it could just be, hey, this guy looks really impressive. Let's just give him enough opportunities just to see what he does.
Well, right tackle's got to be really, with this team being in good position, the roster being in good shape. Yes, they had some attrition in free agency, but right tackle is really one of the very few unsettled positions on this roster right now. Some of the other unsettled positions on the roster reside in the secondary, some of which is because of injuries that occurred in the regular season last year, but also new additions the last couple of years, the attrition in free agency, that sort of thing. So I'm very interested to see right now. Again, Awuzie is not going to come in and be at minicamp, or at least participate, it would seem, at this point. I also don't believe he's going to be a PUP list guy. I think his injury, and obviously being just lighter body weight than an offensive lineman, you would think that he's going to be coming back and maybe would not be a PUP candidate, whereas Lael Collins is probably more likely to be so. But then you've got, DJ Turner stepping in. What does that look like, right? Sidney Jones, the guy that the Bengals brought in via free agency, where does he slate in there? What do they do with the depth chart? And then, of course, the potential rise of Cam Taylor-Britt in the second year, and then all of the stuff at safety, Jordan Battle, Nick Scott, Dax Hill, all of that. I think there's a lot to sort out there, some good problems, but a lot of inexperience and a lot of new faces also.
Yeah, I think it's kind of notable that it was DJ Turner who was starting for Awuzie, at least in OTAs, just because you have guys like Alan George, Sidney Jones, who just sound like these are guys who at least have experience playing, so that you're just throwing a rookie, albeit a talented second-round rookie out there, but a rookie nonetheless, and going up against guys like T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, again, in very preliminary stages of everything. But I think it's cool that they're really getting their feet wet as much as possible. And the same goes to Jordan Battle. So the whole thing with that was he was taking starting reps at safety along with Dax Hill. Nick Scott was also getting some reps, but Nick Scott did say in the locker room after practice that he's still working back from a shoulder injury. So he was placed on injured reserve right before the end of the regular season with the Los Angeles Rams. So obviously that injury didn't prevent him from signing or passing a physical in the offseason, but the Bengals are just taking that slow. They don't want to push him too far. So he seems to be close to getting back. But Jordan Battle, I guess, taking those snaps at safety is more of a reflection of Nick Scott not being 100%, but also at the same time, even if Nick Scott was healthy, I don't think it would shock us completely if he was rotating in and out with Nick Scott at the safety position. It could just be an indication that there could be more of a rotation at safety, and they're trying to get him acclimated, or it's just Nick Scott's out and Jordan Battle's next up, which is also kind of notable because like they still have Michael Thomas, they still have Tyson Anderson at safety. Yep. So the fact that they're getting a third-round rookie, snaps with the starters, it's not nothing to me. Like just because these guys are the newest names in here and it makes sense to give them reps, like I still think it's notable how they're playing over some guys who were here last year.
So we had a comment, I should have pulled it up, but from one of our listeners, and he comments quite a bit on our videos and watches it, so we appreciate that. But he had left a comment, I think, on our last video of the listener questions where we talked about potential rotations of safeties, and maybe there's true starters but heavy rotators. Maybe there's a lot of three safety looks. And the commenter said, I seem to remember Lou Anarumo saying, I don't really like to rotate players or rotate starters, rotate safeties, that sort of thing. While that's true, he has also not preferred to have to rely on fresh-faced rookies, guys who are heavily inexperienced, that sort of thing. So I think there's a balance of, what his preferences are and the way his hand is forced with, the losing both Bell and Bates, and having three new safeties to work with here. Dax Hill isn't brand new, but for all intents and purposes, he's kind of new. So, there's a fine line to walk between, I don't remember the exact quote of him not preferring to rotate guys, but, he also has preferred some veterans in certain places and not have to rely so heavily on rookies and guys that don't have a lot of experience. And he's going to have to probably do that this year.
Yeah, so if it's just Dax and let's just say Nick Scott, who are just the new Bates and Bell, I don't think that would be surprising. But I think the reason why this year can be different is because when you have that tandem of Bates and Bell, arguably the best tandem of safeties that we've seen in recent memory in the NFL, like there's no real use to kind of muddy those waters and screw up what was working, right? Because they're both experienced guys, both experienced in the system. You take one guy out, you rotate another guy, a rookie, nonetheless, in, and it messes up the communication. When you remove that tandem from the equation, I think all bets are kind of off right now because, again, Dax Hill at safety is still a projection at this point in time. Like, he's only really played the position in the preseason, so he hasn't played with any of the fellow starters. He hasn't played against a starting offense just yet. You have a guy, Nick Scott, who, again, has 1 year of starting experience at safety, but he's new to the system. And Jordan Battles is basically in the same boat because he's a rookie, but he's a very experienced rookie for being like a 4-year starter in a Nick Saban defense. So they've raved constantly about his intangibles and his communication skills and just picking up things very quickly. He seems very mentally apt at this point for being in June in his rookie season. So if you are in a situation where you need to get the best combination out there, you need to get the best plan possible, and you've lost so many snaps at safety, maybe a rotation, or maybe just, I guess it would be just a rotation, like seeing where and when to put these guys onto the field and what permutations you want in certain situations. Maybe that's not the worst thing in the world for Lou Anarumo, who's so, on the record for being against that type of thing. When you lose that experience, though, and you're trying to compensate for a level of talent, you've done so much to the safety room already, maybe it's an indication that things could change.
Yeah, Ken Hammock here makes a good point. Battle has definitely been coached up by a defensive back specialist in Nick Saban, of course, and you have to trust the coaching, you have to trust the competition he played against, the big games they played in, includes the DJ Turner as well, the big games that he played at Michigan and everything there. But I said this, I was on a show earlier, I was on Strawberry Ice's show, and actually Mike Petraglia was on there as well, which was a treat. And I said this, Battle has said said some quote basically that, some of the early concepts in his career at safety have been a little bit more basic, and then he's kind of expanded a little bit and that sort of thing. It reminded me a lot of when the Bengals drafted Sean Williams, and Sean Williams was a in the box safety. It just made me think about that. He was a guy that needed, kind of to learn, especially as a pro, needed to learn a lot of professional coverage concepts in general at the safety position. And he ended up having a pretty decent career with the Bengals, a couple of seasons with multiple interceptions, was a solid safety next to Jesse Bates for a little while there. So, it may be a little bit of the same thing where there is a little bit of a learning curve or, a steep ramp up for a player like Battle. But I think also if you're Lou Anarumo, you have to trust your draft process in the team's draft process in terms of the athletic profiles that you've preferred to go with some of these guys, and or the maturity, big school, big game performances in those types of arenas. You have to kind of trust that at some point. And I think that's kind of where where his hand is forced, really.
Pretty much. And like all of these like battles and these competitions, it's ultimately between a lot of players who are going to be on the roster anyways, and it's just a matter of how big or how small their roles are going to be. The one true competition might just be a punter, and right now it doesn't seem like it doesn't even seem like a competition, just because everything that we've seen from Brad Robbins, he's absolutely booming the crap out of these footballs, and he's doing work as a holder. Like, he looks very natural there, just because he held for one of the best kickers in the country in Michigan. So that's going to be maybe the true battle outside of maybe like right tackle. Maybe you will have some type of roster implications and roster shakeup at right tackle, depending on how that goes. But this is going to be the second year in a row where we're going to have a true, win or go home battle at punter. And right now it looks like it's all a rookie.
So, I want to get ones that it sounds like you're kind of in agreement with some of the ones that I'm talking about. I definitely want to get some of your suggestions on this, John, and or our live listeners too. If you've got some positions that or players specifically you're going to be looking at as practices ramp up, the intensity ramps up with mandatory minicamp and into training camp, we want to hear about it. But obviously now, in a great interview from All Bengals, at least Jesse, with Joe Mixon down at his camp. And one of the clips that was shared recently in that interview was basically, she just point blank asked the question, did you ever feel like you were not going to be a Cincinnati Bengal this year? And of course he was honest, to give him credit on that. But I think there was also a little bit of player speak where, self-confidence and all that kind of thing. But his self-confidence in being a Bengal and his role with this team has seemingly come from the front office, right? They have shown an immense, and the coaches, they have shown an immense amount of support through, obviously he missed some time last year with the injury. And then, of course, the stuff that happened this offseason, or reportedly happened this offseason, and some of the questions with that. And of course, then the contract as well, in the devaluation of that position across the league. He seems to be pretty confident, John, that, or he always was confident that he was going to stay with the team. He was going to be their primary back. The running back spot in general, though, be it him and the share of carries, him, Travion Williams, Chase Brown, there's going to be some talk about that, but it does seem to be that Joe Mixon's the lead guy, and by somewhat wide margin as of this point.
Oh, 100%. If the running back room stays the same, then this is still obviously Joe Mixon's group. The outlook of the whole situation now compared to what it was maybe like the first week of March is obviously completely different, because if you were to see the timeline of events that have happened since March and June, it should surprise no one that Joe Mixon is still on the team and still has leverage to maybe not take a pay cut. But that wasn't the case, obviously, in February, in the beginning of March, when they still had the chance to resign Samaje Perine. Like the Minnesota Vikings right now, they re-signed Alexander Mattison, and they're planning to release Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook had 2 years left on his deal. He signed that extension the same offseason that Joe Mixon did. It's a similar story, right? Like injuries, devaluation of the position, the whole 9 yards, right? The Bengals wanted to re-sign Samaje Perine. He took what he believes to be a bigger role in Denver. The Bengals like, okay, we can't really replace Samaje Perine in free agency. Let's hold on to Joe Mixon. Let's see how the draft unfolds. The draft unfolds. They're interested in maybe Jahmyr Gibbs at the end of the first. Jahmyr Gibbs is a Detroit Lion in the teens. They wait until the 5th round to take a running back. It makes all the sense in the world now to keep a veteran like Joe Mixon to take the lion's share of the carries, see what he can do, and what is essentially the last year of his deal, because they can cut him with basically virtually zero consequence in 2024, right? So with everything that's happened, it makes sense why Joe Mixon's still here. And the team is not obligated to tell Joe Mixon about their future plans, about what may or may not happen to him. As far as he knows, like, he's always had a phenomenal relationship with Mike Brown and the Blackburns. Like, I remember that picture that they all took together when he was about to sign, or maybe he just signed that contract. Like, that was a very personable, moment, and I think it was very unique compared to other players who would sign extensions, because that offseason, like 2020, that was the beginning of the purge of the old Bengals, and they were bringing in guys like DJ Turner and Von Bell. And so Joe Mixon signing like essentially a $50 million deal as a Marvin Lewis player in this new era of Bengals, like, I think that stood out to them. They identified him as like a leader that they wanted on this team going forward, and they wanted to pay him like that. So I think that relationship has always kind of been there, and I don't think it's deteriorated or wavered at all from either sides. But obviously Mixon didn't have to be privy of what may or may not have been the plans with him going forward. And we'll see if it stays the same. We'll see if they need more cap space because they intend to extend Joe Burrow and T. Higgins. But going forward, Joe Mixon is 100% going to be on this roster.
Yeah, there was a question in our live chats about, did he take a pay cut? No, not as of yet. Again, that may be coming depending on the contract situations, extensions, and all of
Jonah
that.
Williams can't take a pay cut. He's got a guaranteed salary. Next question.
Yeah. So that was another comment in here. Yeah. So we'll transition here into a potential breakout player in just a minute. But what other spots, scenarios, players are you looking at as mandatory minicamp starts to unfold?
Yeah, I still want to see the rotation of receiver, I think, because we've heard some things about Charlie Jones, Andre Yosevis, but like Trent Irwin's still here, Trent Taylor's still here, Stanley Morgan's still here. I want to see like what the pecking order is right now, because again, we're not going to get anything too in depth with the trenches yet. Like, we're going to see, maybe like the rotation there, but we're still going to see some highlights of the guys catching passes and whatnot, and maybe the order of what they're doing. Maybe we're going to see if Charlie Jones is mainly in the slot, if he's also taking snaps on the outside. I believe Yosevis even got on the field pretty early with like the 1s or the 2s for a couple of reps and no TAs. So I want to see kind of how that rotation is shaking out. Maybe we can get a glance of what it's going to be in training camp, or again, maybe right now it's to get a lot of these young players, a lot of these rookies, like, acclimated really quickly and getting these reps early just to see how they kind of handled it.
I've said it a handful of times before on our show, but I think Darren Simmons has a reasonable amount of pull in terms of roster decisions and different players that are kept, that are drafted. And so I think the back end of the roster for the wide receiver positions, he'll have a decent amount of say in that, because you have Stanley Morgan, who isn't really much or has not been much of an offensive threat or an offensive weapon in the Bengals system, but has been an immensely valuable guy on special teams. He'll have some moments of selflessness on offense where he'll block and do various things as well. But I mean, his primary role is special teams, and he is excellent at it as, a gunner and downing punts and all that kind of stuff. You got Irwin, who really doesn't do a ton on special teams comparative to some of the others, but did more on offense and stepped up in a big way last year, 4 touchdown catches, a couple of big games for him. You've got Trent Taylor, who's been kind of steady, but now you have the 2 new guys. And these 2 new guys you think that they drafted you have to think that they have some special teams ability or were drafted because of that. So it's, as final cuts come, which is a ways down the road, I think Darren Simmons is going to have to really think about, and work with, Troy Walters, Zach Taylor, Brian Callahan to say, these guys can help you out on offense, but I really need them on special teams in these capacities as well. And this is my order of value or how I value these guys, or what I think they can bring to the table in that regard, because you're going to need to maximize roster spots. The minimization of kickoff return specialists now because of the rule changes over the past handful of years, including this offseason, everything that plays into it. But you also look at how the Bengals lost the AFC Championship game last year with punt issues, punt coverage, all that kind of stuff. And so, I mean, he's gonna have his mark in this group.
A gunner battle maybe between Yoshivas and Morgan, right? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
that's a tall order for Yoshivas to kind of take on as a rookie, but I think that's where he'll probably, like, if they were to cut one of Morgan or they're trying to stash Yoshivas on the practice squad, that might be the thing that kind of decides that. I think both of them ultimately make the roster. Like, the main competition is probably going to be, hey, who can return kicks better? You know, Charlie Jones or Trent Taylor, or who can return putts better? And it's going to be, the onus is primarily going to be on Trent Taylor because that's where his main value is. Whereas Charlie Jones, he's going to be developed as a future potential starter, or if not, like the next Trent Irwin as a receiver who also just happens to be an electrifying, kickoff and punt returner. So it's going to be like those four guys trying to make the most of their opportunities, but the rookies will probably have the edge just because of draft status, right? So they have 4 years of a cheap contract under them, and I think they'll probably succeed with the opportunities that they're going to get this summer.
Well, Charlie Jones was one of our potential breakout players. I think it was the first one we did when we kicked off the list, and we'll have another one in just a second. And just to kind of tie a bow on this segment or this topic, we going back a second, we talked running back and we didn't mention the name Chris Evans. And so, and I guess we're talking also a little bit of return men, special teams value, that sort of thing. So I guess there's a little bit of a, relevance in terms of bringing him up at this point in the conversation. But again, just a guy that everybody's kind of shaking their head, shrugging their shoulders, going, I don't know. I don't know, because he's made a couple of nice plays as a versatile player on offense in big games, but it's been few and far between. And then, injuries and or lack of kick returns when that was seemingly a job that he was going to get. I don't know. I don't know if there's writing on the wall yet or not.
If we were to make like a tier list of the entire Bengals roster, which is honestly kind of a nice idea for a future episode, but if we were to make a tier list, there would be a tier just IDK, and I think Jackson Carman and Chris Evans would fit perfectly there, because I don't know who they are at this point.
Yeah, I like that. We'll do that. We'll have to do that. We're going to move on to the potential breakout player, another one on the list in just a second here. Before we do, I want to remind folks to subscribe to our YouTube channel if you are so inclined. The show icon is above John Sheeran there. You can click that, click the bell to be notified when we go live, when new content is available, but do so only after you hit the subscribe button. And of course, give if you like what we're doing on this show or other videos of ours, give it a thumbs up. We appreciate that. If you like the audio side of things, you can get the show on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, all of the major platforms. We are there. Leave us a review, hopefully a 5-star one. If you like the show, we appreciate that. And you can get our show, Talking Football with Bengal Jim and Friends, Coach Speak and Chalk Talk with Matt Minnick, and of course 3 and Out with Jason and Kevin. All of those are on the Cincy Jungle podcast channel for your listening pleasure, and we're going to keep hammering you with content quite often throughout the week, even though it's a little bit of a slower period, and then we're going to ramp stuff up big time, obviously, as the off season rolls on and into the regular season. So go check it out. Before we also do that, I want to share this. We've talked about this a little bit. Orlando Brown Jr. graced us with his presence on this program a little while ago, and we want to support the things he is doing here with the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation in the greater Cincinnati area. We started a GoFundMe. We've raised a little bit of money. We've also got some set aside thanks to some generous super chats, and some we'll kind of match some of the donations as well on our own. But we have a goal. It's not a huge goal. It's a little over. It's 1,075. We did 75 for his jersey number, but we want to just make an impact for him. Say thank you for coming on the show. Welcome to Cincinnati, and of course, support a cause that is near and dear to him. Diabetes is a disease that has, had a major impact on him and his family. So we want to do what we can. We've already had some generosity shown. We appreciate it if you can continue to help us out with that. That would be awesome. Just a thank you as we continue to work with him, and we're going to try and get him back on during potentially closer to training camp and whatnot, hopefully. So we'll see what happens there. But he's a great guy, and we want to show some support. And I know all of you, we ask that often of you, but we appreciate your generosity as always. Let's Move on, though, John, to the 2023 potential breakout players list. We had Charlie Jones and Travion Williams so far, right? We're going to stick on the offensive side of the ball, but it's not going to be a skill position player. Some buzz occurred, I believe it was from last night, where a lot of the Bengals players attended the Reds game and were, taking BP and doing some field. By the way, Lael Collins, I think, was out there kind of fielding some balls at first base, it looked like, maybe making a couple throws. That was kind of cool to see. But, we saw a lot of guys out there, and one guy that kind of started to create a little buzz was, and based on a photo, and we'll get there in a second, was this young man who happens to play offensive line for the Cincinnati Bengals. And that person is second-year man Cordell Volson, left guard. And we'll get to the picture in just a second here, but this is a guy that had some nice moments as a rookie. I'm going to pull up some film here in just a second. I slowed it down. You can see here, we can start this over. I'll rewind it a little bit here. What I did, John, is I pulled late season film, and you can see here he is, I think, up against Patrick Queen here. Karras is going to come into the combo block, and Mixon gets a nice gain there, and he's just working, right? I mean, he continues to work on another player there. Here he is in a pass pro, just kind of sticks with it. I mean, nothing super fancy, but sticks with it. Nice play to Tyler Boyd. Here's some of the best footage from the Buffalo Bills game. This was the was this the touchdown to Hunt? Yeah, this was the touchdown to Hayden Hurst. We can go back on that one here. Let's go back right here. So here he is, obviously next to Jackson Carman right down here. And you look at him, and a little twist there, picks it up and kind of pushes the guy into the pile and makes him irrelevant. Wide open Hurst touchdown. And obviously this game was, the offensive line was playing outstanding. Look at him just stand up. I think that's Ed Oliver maybe right there, or someone else, but you matched up against Ed Oliver. Nice on a number of occasions. This one's regular speed here. You can just kind of see gets a guy to the ground, and obviously that results in a touchdown. Here, we'll slow this one down for you here. Kind of gets in there and combo blocks there, and then sticks with the block for a nice gain to Tyler Boyd. I think this one was pretty early in the game. This one, I think, was one of my favorites. If you watch this one, he'll get on a guy. Oh, no, it's not this one. It's another pass.
He's still moving. That's still like moving, 6 yards down. He's engaged.
You know what? I think it was the Higgins one. Let me go back to this Higgins play. Did we do the Higgins one yet? Maybe we didn't. But there's one where I thought it showed really good awareness, where he's blocking a guy, and then as he's kind of blocking a guy, he turns his head to the left to make sure that Carman wasn't beat on his side, and also see if he can, because he got help from Karras. Yeah, I think I passed it. Bummer. I'll see. So
he was looking for work, though. He was looking for work. He was looking for work. Active.
These are some ones. These are some reps I didn't like against the Chiefs here. You see, he just gets caught and just pushed back there, and it results in a sack early on for the Bengals. Let me see if I can find that one. It was a pass to T. Higgins. I'll see if I can pull that back up for you, because I really liked that play. This was the Hurst play. Was this the one to Higgins? Yeah, I think this is the one. So you can see here, he's kind of turning his head and starting to get over there. He had a guy locked up. Karras helped him out on that one. And as he got help from Karras, he ended up trying to help out Carman as well, which I liked. Now, this is the picture that's causing the stir, John. This is part of the reason why I think, in breakout, maybe a relative term, he looks like he is bulked up in a good way. At least, we could take stock or lack thereof in these pictures or whatever. I mean, we got all excited about the Lael Collins workout video that was real brief a couple of weeks ago. And so he looks like he has really beefed himself up in a good way, muscle mass type of thing. Here's the thing. I mean, a Pro Bowl player, maybe not, but you saw flashes last year. You saw some good games, some somewhat regular good snaps from him. There were some issues. There was a couple of snaps late in the year. You saw him kind of get pushed way back, causing that sack in the Chiefs game. But there's the whole floor ceiling debate and all of that, but I think that he's poised to take a nice step this year. And if he does, that's a key piece to this team, aside from health and aside from, the safeties playing well, the new safeties playing well and all of that. If he can take another step in his development and get to be, a truly solid left guard, which I think he can be, or the potential is there, the consistency is needed, but that is going to be a major facet to the Bengals potentially winning a Super Bowl.
I mean, that's country strength right there. Like that's a guy who's, I mean, he was working on what, like in North Dakota, his like family's got like a farm, or it's like some type of industrial plant. Like, yeah, he's he's country strong in that regard. But I think last year ended, or was, about as good as you could have expected. Because you got to remember, Volson, he played multiple spots at North Dakota State in like 60-something games, but he was primarily a tackle. So he was making a transition in his own right. And I know there's a narrative that it's very simple for a tackle to move inside to guard, or it's supposedly supposed to benefit said offensive lineman. But when you're moved inside closer to the center, it gets a lot faster, obviously. And that was an issue that Jackson Carman had when he was trying to transition to guard. They had him doing a bunch of jump sets, and he was missing with his hands. And with Volson, there was kind of the same plan, but he, I think, adapted much better, and he adapted to the increased speed. Not only are you going from FCS level college players to the NFL, but again, you're playing in space more often at tackle, and your angles are just better, and it's easier in that regard to going inside against NFL defensive tackles who are much stronger, who are much quicker. And I think it ended up being as good as you could have expected. It was very up and down. He had some very good weeks. He had some very bad weeks. Very bad being like the very beginning of the season when Cam Hayward made him look like a fool on the very first play, right? But if you look at him compared to other rookie guards who started last year, he was considerably better than Kenyon Green was, who was a first-round pick by the Houston Texans. He was about on par with Zion Johnson, who was another first-round pick with the Los Angeles Chargers. Cole Strange ended up being the most productive pass-blocking rookie interior offensive lineman, believe it or not, and he was like considered like a giant reach in the first round. But Volson was on par with pretty much every other rookie who was starting last year, and a lot of people didn't really expect him to go as early as he did, but he just kind of took his role in stride, and he made the absolute most of it. And for the most part, like, he looked like he was on the same page in terms of a communication standpoint, and obviously being aware in pass protection, getting your assignment down, but also recognizing that Joe Burrow is a quarterback that likes to extend plays. He'll hold the ball too long sometimes, and then that may lead to some pressures. But it never looked like the game was too fast or too big for him. And obviously the technical issues, they can get eased out as his career progresses and as he gets more comfortable in the scheme and whatnot. But for a rookie who is thrusted into a faster game at a faster position, it ended up looking as good as possible. So that gives you a pretty good base floor for him to continue progressing. It seems like he's on that path right now.
Yeah, I mean, small school to starting, AFC North NFL guard it's a big jump. There's two questions: age/ceiling, right? Because he was drafted older. He was an older guy when he was drafted. And the other, John, for me, is the height. Because sometimes guards are, maybe 6'3", 6'4". You want them a little squattier to have that lower center of gravity. Sometimes, you have the squattier, interior defensive lineman that you're going up against to see, sometimes the height, while it's imposing and you can have the reach that usually goes along with that and everything, former tackle, as you mentioned, while you have all of that, sometimes it can work against you, right? And I think that's what happened on that one clip, if you saw there against the Chiefs, where he just got under him and it just kept pushing it because it was a leverage game, and that guy was quite a bit shorter, I think, than Volson was, and just kind of got under him, so to speak, and moved him back. So those are the things I think, and then you talk about consistency, but I don't know if you have questions about if the height continues to be an issue for you at guard, and then, of course, how close to the ceiling is he based on what we saw last year?
Well, interestingly enough, it was Orlando Brown who was talking to Jeff Hobson the other day, and Brown said that, like, he believes that Volson has quote-unquote Pro Bowl potential with his size and mental makeup. quote, I think he really uses his height to his advantage. His mindset and his length are two things that are really going to separate him in the long run. This is from Bengals.com and Jeff Hobson and the wonderful work that he does. We got to get him back on the show as well. But I agree with you, though. Like, height typically, when you're that close to the middle of the formation, leverage is king, and how much you can control your pad level is ultimately going to determine your success or your failure. That's why Geno Atkins was so dominant, because he could just be under the pads of any guard that he would go up against without even trying, right? So, but with height does come length. So Volson does have, I think, about average to above average arms. I think he's just under 34 inches, which is why I think some teams did peg him more as a guard, because they prefer to have their tackles with at least 34-inch arms. So there is more length to him for being a guard. And again, it's going to come down to primarily timing and placement with his hands. Like, if he can get those more under control in a consistent manner, he can mitigate some of those leverage issues, and he can, I guess, recover faster and kind of reset and re-anchor, and that will lead to a more even battle when it comes to leverage. But it really comes down to making sure that your hands strike in the right place, because that we saw against the Chiefs, like, he just let his chest be exposed completely. Like, he missed with his hands were late, and at that point, it doesn't matter how long your arms are. If a guy just has you right in your temple of your chest, like, there's nothing you can do. You're on skates at that point, and you're trying to get your hands back underneath, but at that point, you're already 5 yards back in the pocket, and Joe Burrow's taking a sec to start the drive. So it really does come down to the timing and the placement of his hands, and if he can get that down, then he can use this height to his advantage for sure.
You mentioned him just a minute ago, but the guy he's playing next to as well, Orlando Brown Jr., a guy who has 35-inch arms, Jonah Williams about 33 and a half. And so, say what you want about Brown versus Williams and that sort of thing. I mean, I think most people feel like this will be a left tackle upgrade. I think the Bengals feel that way. Otherwise, it wouldn't have made the move, right? So now you have a supposedly, or on paper at least, a better player flanked by him. Volson is flanked by a better player on the left. And then, of course, I think, as this season wore on too, and you saw in some of those clips there, he and Karras worked very well together on a lot of occasions later in the year, particularly in that Bills game, a lot of good combo blocks and things like that. So, you would think then that maybe plays a little bit into a supposed or marked improvement from Volson in terms of who is flanking him on the left.
Yeah. And just for recap as well, He logged over 2,000 snaps at right tackle at North Dakota State, about 100 snaps at left tackle, 400 snaps at right guard, only 19 snaps at left guard. So left guard was pretty much a brand new position, and I think you have a good point there. Like, a lot of when the Bengals started to kind of transition more to their gap scheme and run blocking, it led to a lot of deuce blocks and combo blocks with Ted Karras at the center. Like, that's a big part of just a gap scheme, and when you're running downhill like that, and a lot of it comes down to making sure that the leverage that you attack with, that whatever it's the nose or it's the 3 technique, making sure that you basically clear that gap out and hand it off to the center before you move up to the second level. He seemed very apt in those regards. I think he was way more consistent as a run blocker compared to when he was a pass blocker, but obviously his value in the Bengals offensive line is going to be determined by how clean can you keep Joe Burrow, right? And you're still having dominant 3 techniques in the AFC North and on this slate of schedules, so it's going to be a big test to see how far he's grown in that regard.
Yeah, well, hopefully he's the guy that does take a step forward. Not that he was awful or anything last year. Like you said, he was pretty good on a number of occasions. He had some down moments as well, but if the consistency where that pendulum doesn't swing so wildly from side to side, if you can get a little more consistency out of him, I think that's going to be a huge thing for the Cincinnati Bengals. And breakout would be a relative term for him because he's already a starter on the offensive line, but to become a solid and reliable guy in year 2 would be a huge boost for the Bengals. Let's drop the mic and get on out of here, John. We're doing a little bit more abbreviated episodes than usual in the regular season. Still went a tiny bit longer than I had anticipated, but we talked about a lot. It was fun. What do you got for us on our way out?
Kind of a random note, but I'm just ready to call it. Miles Morales is the best Spider-Man. I'm tired of like not saying it. Like he's the best. Mic drop.
I haven't seen the Into the Spider-Verse movies. I have wanted to, and I have not.
Definitely
and everybody gushes about them, and I'm like, man, I am missing out. So I got to do that. I got to catch up. And my oldest is kind of into Spider-Man. He's more into Mario right now, but he's been watching some of the Spider-Man stuff. So maybe those are some things we should watch together coming up here. But yeah, I hear good things. I hear really good things. I just want to go back. Talking about the Reds a little bit. Really fun to watch. I know we're not a Reds podcast. We usually when we talk about the Reds, it's in almost a laughing manner. But it is very cool to see this city kind of come alive, and it's really cool to see the synergy between the Bengals and the Reds too. I mean, maybe it just wasn't covered very much. Maybe there wasn't much synergy, but the players taking batting practice and Reds players cheering on Bengals players as they hit them out of the park and all kinds of stuff. That's really cool to see. It's really cool to see what appears to be generational players on the Reds as the Bengals are grooming and bringing up generational players on their respective roster. A shout out to a guy I used to host podcast with, Mickey Menser at Who Dey Fans. He now does work in the Reds front office, and I know the Reds have been kind of a little bit of a target of some cynicism over the past couple of years, and really I guess past a lot of years. It's cool. I'm happy for him, and I'm happy for the fans of the Reds and the city of Cincinnati to see a cool product. We don't know exactly what's going to happen. Obviously, baseball's a long season. There are a lot more games to play. I think they're around 500 at this point, right? And beating the Dodgers. Dodgers are a very good team, and beating the Dodgers the way they did the last couple of nights, it's cool to see, and it's cool to see the fans jazzed about that team, and of course excited about the Bengals and FC Cincinnati as well.
I don't think we can gloss over this. Burrow hit not one, not two, not three, but 4 home runs in batting practice. I was talking with one of my friends who's about the same size as Burrow, and he's like, if I had a month of training, I could probably hit a home run in batting practice. I'm like, no, you cannot. It's so much harder than it actually looks. And then Burrow, who I guess hasn't picked up a bat or hasn't played baseball in years, but he apparently was a pretty good baseballer before he committed to basketball and football, just casually hits 4, albeit Great American Ballpark is a hitter's ballpark, but I don't think there's someone. I don't think
puts him in the seats. Puts him in the seats. I think it was Cody Ford. Was it Cody Ford that put him out there too? I mean, he's small. I thought that was DJ Reader at first, and they said no, it's because they were way far back. And I remember DJ Reader was a hell of a baseball player too. And so I was like, oh, is that DJ Reader? And they're like, no, it's Cody Ford. And so a number of Bengals players showing up and playing some good baseball there, but really, really cool to see the state of sports in the city of Cincinnati. And hopefully it continues with the Bengals going forward this season. All right, we're going to get out of here. Thank you, John Sheeran. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in live. Those who listen to the show after the fact or watch the show after the fact, again, get it on your favorite audio streamer. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Keep it to cincyjungle.com for all your Bengals news, opinions, analysis, all of that. Go check out John's work at A to Z Sports as well. He's killing it over there. And hey, we'll be back with more coming up. We'll have some other fun stuff, but you got to subscribe to the YouTube channel to be able to get it. So check that out. We'll be back with more coming up. See you, John.
See you.